Hello, good morning and welcome to Thoughts and Updates. I am in a beautiful part of Glasgow in the West End, next to what is going to be the beginning of my little update. And I'm going to quote from what I'm looking at. I seem to see the gleam in the near distance of the weapons and accoutrements of this army of the future, this citizen army, the warder of these islands and the pledge of the peace and the continued greatness of this empire. A speech made on my birthday, birth date in 1913, by Lord Roberts, who had fought in the Indian Mutiny in Bela and Abyssinia, Lushai and Afghanistan, Burma, and in South Africa. And what a magnificent statue it has been created here in Kelvin Grove Park for this particular proponent of empire. And it is a statue that sits in this magnificent park. And if I turn this round to show you the greenery of it and also the vastness of it, which takes up not quite the equivalent of Central Park in New York, but a significant part of the West End, and the University of Glasgow is over there, my old alma mater, and also of my eldest daughter. And I found the statue when looking for places to investigate the idea of slavery and how Glasgow has been built on the back of it, as I did last week. But also, this is a monument to a man who was a military figure, an incredible military figure, fought in the Indian Mutiny, fought in the Boer War, particularly well decorated in the Boer War, and also died of pneumonia in November 1914, whilst in his 80s visiting troops in the front line in the First World War. And it brings me to a kind of place in terms of our statues of what we should be doing, because there are military figures all over the United Kingdom on monuments, statues erected in order to thank the military for their service. And yet the service that they were involved in, if we take the Boer War for example, the British were the first country in the world to create concentration camps, and they put the Afrikaans in them in South Africa during the Boer War. Should we celebrate anybody who was involved in it? Or is it wrong to blame the military for the acts of politicians? After all, the military, and every country has a military, are out there in order to do the bidding of a political beast, the country for which they serve. We talk now of thanking people in the military for their service. Just a few hundred yards from here, in another part of this park, is a memorial to the 1418 war, the First World War and the Second World War, which was vandalised during the Black Lives Matter's protests. Unfortunately, because it's not a monument to anybody, but a monument to the fallen. And one of friends of mine, he has a relative whose name is on that memorial, and he took, as you can imagine, well against the whole protest movement because of the desecration of the memory of his relative. The people who did it did so because of the anger, quite rightly, that they feel over what has happened in America and actually what has happened in the United Kingdom. Anybody who thinks that racism is not prevalent in the United Kingdom clearly has their head anywhere else apart from on the top of their shoulders for many, many years. Finding the right response is important, but also facing difficult things is also important. Now, here is a thought. The statues that we have of the United Kingdom, way back in ancient Greek times, where they found anybody who was guilty of cheating in the Olympics, they would create a statue for them as a warning to the others. In Scotland, we have an old tradition, way back into the 20s and 30s, if you didn't pay your debts at the local shop, then your name would be put in the shop window and you would have to suffer the shame. So, is there a way of taking that and using that not only to identify what it is that we are shamed for, but also what we want to remind ourselves that we should never go back to without losing the monuments that we have to our past and our history. Of course, there are some that should be taken down, not thrown perhaps in a river, but put in a museum somewhere to remind us of these things. But there are many of these statues all over the place, and I'm going to keep finding them out and having a look at them because I think they are important to us all to continue the debate. Now, this weekend it has been quite difficult. I've finished up for a couple of weeks off work, and quite a lot to finish off before I managed to put my feet up and sort myself out. So writing took a little bit of a back seat. So my very good friend Brad over in America was lovely and wonderful because I was very late in terms of sending my articles in. And can I just say hello to all the Americans who have got in contact through Twitter, who are talking about subscribing to this particular YouTube update. Thank you very much. There are too many of you to mention. The power that Ringside Report and Brad has in terms of trying to build some kind of resistance to Donald Trump's continued presidency is not just impressive, it's massively important. And particularly the people who spoke very warmly of the article I did last week warning about complacency in the Biden campaign. Being 9 or 15 points ahead is not enough to guarantee that the Electoral College is going to provide for you a release from the last 4 years of just absurdity. And that absurdity is part of one of the articles I sent to Brad this morning. Mr Trump changes one of his minds. The idea of changing tack on the coronavirus in order to be convinced by the science is something that nobody should be fooled by. A leopard doesn't always change its spots. I also sent an article over about a young boxer called Kieron Conway who will be boxing in one of the Matchroom bills in August. He is a young prospect, 23 years old, from England, and is going to be fighting for the British title, not for the first time, for the second time. A really decent fighter, and it made me think about the fighters who are coming out of this COVID pandemic and trying to find some kind of platform to continue their career. First of all, it is those guys who were on the cusp of getting somewhere, like Conway. Then there's also the journeyman, and there's been a lot of talk about journeymen giving it up. These are guys who are fighting for 500, 600, 700 quid a fight, even 1,500, 2,000 pounds if it's televised, every second week. And they're in the away corner, which means that they're supposed to lose, but they ain't stupid and they ain't unskilled. In fact, a lot of British, European and world champions have cut their teeth on fighting guys like this who are able over 4 or 6 or even 8 rounds to provide reasonable opposition and really teach guys how to deal with awkward customers. Will they come out of this when we have bills of 5 or 6, whether it be in the bubble in the MGM in Las Vegas or at the BT studio in Stratford in London or in Eddie Hearn's Matchroom's back garden, an opportunity to be in a bill in order to continue their career? Who knows? We'll soon find out. Last night at the BT studio we did have a relatively okay bill, not hugely impressive, but Joe Joyce was impressive in stopping Dalgleish in the second round, the German. In the eyes of the referee, unable to continue after some sickening body shots. I was more impressed by Joyce, I have to say, last night than I have been in the past. I've always thought him a come-forward fighter who lacked finesse, but last night he wore the guy down and did particularly well. From boxing on to football, and this week I have sent in my SFSA articles all about how we are trying to get back into stadia. Just like boxing, football has a similar issue, playing behind closed doors, not having a crowd, and I quite enjoy the BBC articles or the articles wherever on Liverpool or Real Madrid or the Bundesliga being won by Bayern Munich or the 9th in a row Juventus title or whatever it is that's out there in Europe. But the idea of Ayr United playing is something that I would love to get back to seeing because they're my team. and they're the ones that I want to watch. I don't necessarily want to watch anybody else. When will I get to do that? October. It's July. Okay, it's the end of July, but it's October. It's a tough time. And it was Mark Williamson, mate of mine from Sweet for Addicts, who sent me a text during the week saying, don't you miss it? And you do. You miss your own football. You miss your own sport. You miss your own team. You miss your own fighter. You miss your own culture. So the one thing, however, that's happened during the course of the week is that in Paisley there were false negatives in tests, which led to the call off a game. And Rangers apparently played 6 players having not had the results of their testing in a behind-the-doors friendly. So as it stands at the moment, we've got lots of friendlies happening, and we've got the beginning of football season for the top flight on the 1st of August, which is just a week away, less than a week now. So lots of questions, and it led me to Mr Doncaster, Neil Doncaster, and Mr Fitzpatrick, Tony Fitzpatrick, 2 figures of Scottish football who talked about all of this. Tony Fitzpatrick being the chief executive of St Mirren, Neil Doncaster the head of the SPFL, Scottish Professional Football League. And I have, as I did in my Mr Trump changes one of his minds for Ringside Report for the Scottish Football Supporters Association, I do the scurrilous article once a week. And this week you can read about Tony Fitzpatrick meeting Alan Stubbs in Job Centre Plus. For this coming week, I have written how certain Mr Kenny Dalgleish is the security guard at ALDI's, not allowing Mr Fitzpatrick and Mr Doncaster in without face coverings because of what happened during the week. So, a week ahead of not having work to go to, but there'll be plenty, no doubt, to get busy with. So, from me here at Kelvin Grove Park, in the shadow of a statue of a man more decorated than many you can imagine, I leave you to ponder, and we'll see you all next week.